It seems to borrow a little bit from the X-Men where powers develop while the individuals are still young. The twist seems to be that majority of the world has powers, which makes them normal, and those who don't have powers don't fit in. You usually go to the doctor when something is wrong with you, so it's interesting to note that Deku, when he was taken to the doctor to see when he was going to manifest his quirk, he learned that he was going to be quirkless or not have powers, and it almost seemed like something was wrong with him. Speaking of our protagonist, Deku is a character that we can all relate to. All his peers are special, they have powers. Deku is just normal, different. It's even shown visually how different he is, with his backpack being gold or yellow, and his peers, they have blue-gray backpacks. I don't know if that's a school requirement, but it's a pretty cool visual detail. All Might is cool. He reminds me of Superman, but also reminds me a little bit of Guile from Street Fighter. His pants, his boots, he has a unique blonde hairstyle. When All Might has the enemy captured, I was kind of reminded of a commercial, like All Might was endorsing a sports drink. Now I don't know if the heroes in this world have endorsement deals, but I thought it was pretty humorous. Deku is a legit All Might fanboy, and I find it interesting that when he was a kid, he was carrying around an All Might toy, almost like he was carrying around a literal idol. Some of the other heroes reminded me of things that's essential to people or society. There's Death Arms, who reminded me of construction workers or a construction zone. Backdraft is like a firefighter. In Camus Woods, I'm probably butchering that name, but he represents the nature aspect. The entertainment and modeling industries aren't essential for society to function, but that's what Mount Lady reminded me of. People were taking pictures of her like they were the paparazzi and she was the celebrity. She appeared at the last minute to finish the fight and she got all the credit. It's kind of like in real life, there are individuals who don't think highly of blue collar jobs, but they cherish rich celebrities and entertainers and the lifestyle that they have. There's a phrase or proverb that says, don't meet your heroes. Deku, or Izuku, he meets All Might, who looks like the typical superhero. He's tall, muscular, strong jawline, great hair, $1 million smile. But then we see All Might's true form. He's small, skinny, fragile, terrible hair. He's the exact opposite of what Deku expected. With All Might, he's definitely influenced by a few things. He's a power fantasy character like Superman, even a bit of Shazam. Basically, if we were to imagine ourselves as strong or dominant, it would be these characters. When I think of All Might, a scene from Kill Bill comes to mind. Bill, the antagonist of the story, he explains how Superman is Superman. When Superman wakes up, he's Superman. But his alter ego, Clark Kent, what he said about him is,
Clark Kent is how Superman views us. And what are the characteristics of Clark Kent? He's weak, he's unsure of himself, he's a coward. Clark Kent is Superman's critique on the whole human race.
All Might's civilian form is weak, fragile. It doesn't take him much to cough up that much blood. I thought it was interesting that All Might's civilian form, he kind of had like a monstrous look, right? Like he had the black eyes, some of his movements. You wouldn't really expect this from a main hero, so I thought that was pretty unique. So one theme I noticed so far is that the hero life can take a toll on you. All Might's fight with Toxic Chainsaw, it left him severely injured, and even 5 years later, he's limited in how long he can be a hero. To some degree, I think this can be applied to Deku. The slime monster nearly killed him until All Might showed up. Now the slime monster is taking over Katsuki, and just some of the mannerisms makes it seem like Deku has been scarred by this. Speaking of toxic or something harmful to humans, that was something that I noticed recurring in this episode. There's Toxic Chainsaw, who fought All Might. There was the main antagonist, who was made of some kind of slime or sludge. And toxic chemicals, sludge, these are things harmful to humans. Never giving up is a theme. Deku was repeatedly clawing at the slime monster, trying to free Katsuki. I counted over 20 times he was clawing at the slime. Deku is quirkless, but he wanted to do what's right, and it doesn't take powers to do what's right. When stripped of their powers or gadgets, never giving up, willpower. These are qualities real heroes embody. The irony in this episode, Katsuki freed the slime monster trapped in the bottle, only for he himself to get captured later on. And did you notice the foreshadowing with Katsuki drinking from the green can, only to free the villain just moments later? Now Death Arms and the other superheroes arrived on the scene first, but I find it interesting that while they're wearing their superhero uniforms, All Might is wearing his civilian clothes. It's the second episode where All Might can't be bothered to get into his superhero costume. Based on that, it seems that he's just a hero at his core. That's who he is regardless. He doesn't need a uniform. to display the fact that he's a hero. With All Might's attack names having Texas and Detroit in them, I get the feeling that he's from America. Texas is the most physically strongest state in terms of its National Guard size, with 21,000. Detroit is known as Motor City. The biggest automotive companies are based there. We're talking American muscle cars. So the theme is power, and it makes sense why All Might would use Texas and Detroit in the names of his powerful attacks. Now Deku has a mother, but All Might seems to be serving the father role. Sure, he's training him, but he's giving him these chores and is kind of teaching him responsibility. Deku isn't training at some state-of-the-art gym. He's using what he has access to. Sometimes you may not have the resources to get what you need for training. You have to use what you have. Deku said, "I feel like I'm cheating, but All Might thinks it was your own hard work." I think Deku has imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is the feeling that your success isn't because of your own efforts. Research has shown that about 70% of people will experience these feelings at some point. With All Might's One For All quirk, it's a power cultivated and passed from person to person, and it's not dissimilar from real life where people have passed down stories and legends. In the hero's journey, the hero has to earn gifts from the mentor, some kind of weapon, piece of advice, something, and this can be earned by learning, sacrifice, or commitment. Keeping to the schedule and routine is definitely commitment. When Deku told All Might that he'll accept the power, All Might responded, "An immediate reply, that's what I thought you'd say." If a person knows in their heart that they want something, they don't need a day or a week to think it over. Once again, Deku showed a quality of being a hero. In episode 2, he demonstrated courage by facing the sludge villain when everyone else was afraid to. In this episode, after collapsing from exhaustion, he struggled, but he got back up. You'll find in these stories that heroes don't give up, even if they want to. They keep fighting until the end. I'm guessing the creator of My Hero Academia is a fan of Star Wars. In episodes 1 and 2, Tatooine was used, and in episode 3, Dagobah was used as the name of the beach. In Star Wars, Dagobah is the name of the planet that Luke trained on. In the opening recap, there was symbolism with the gray clouds opening up, and there's a ray of sunshine when Deku's voiceover talks about All Might's appearance. It's as if All Might is a beacon of light in a doom and gloom world. All Might is featured on a magazine called Tarzan, and I thought it was a nice homage to Tarzan. What comes to mind with Tarzan is strength or muscles. When we learned that crime decreased year after year because of All Might, the colors on the chart are red and blue, which are All Might's colors. Deku or Izuku getting his power from All Might's hair strand, it kind of reminds me of Samson. In the Bible, there's an individual named Samson who has extraordinary strength, and that strength is tied to the length of his hair. Dagobah Beach Park was cleaned up. It looked way different than its appearance in episode 3. In episode 3, it appeared more like a junkyard, and that has some significance to me. A junkyard keeps garbage or trash, something unwanted. It doesn't have a place in society. But trash or garbage, it can be reused or recycled. Because he's quirkless, Deku or Izuku, he's kind of an outcast in society, but through his training with All Might, he changes. He becomes a new person, so to speak, and he's going to have a different role in society. In superhero material, you can see characters using the junkyard for training. In shows like Static Shock, or even movies like Star Kid, the heroes use the junkyard on their quest to becoming better heroes. Then there's Superman 3, where Clark battled his evil self before being restored to a good Superman. I thought it was interesting that the biggest enemy was worth 0 points. Sometimes in life, we run from the biggest challenges because we think it's too intimidating. We don't think any value would come from it. It could be something like participating in a school play, or even taking on a new job that has more responsibilities. Then there's also taking the initiative of introducing yourself to someone new. But it's moments like this that can help us. It can reveal who we are or who we want to be. And the episode agrees. It was stated, an overwhelming threat. How people act after they've seen this shows their true nature. I was reminded of a war zone when the girl's leg was trapped under rubble. There was suffocating smoke everywhere, and when the giant mech was moving towards her, it resembled a tank. The theme was stated by All Might, self-sacrifice. And using One For All, Izuku sacrificed his body to save the girl, and the girl he saved wanted to give him some of her points. There is significance to Recovery Girl kissing Izuku and healing him. It's shown that when a parent kisses a child's injury or boo-boo, chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin are released, so we actually do feel better. All Might in the gold suit and the fancy background, it kind of reminds me of a game show host. And it makes sense because he fancies himself as an entertainer. In his inner monologue, Izuku said, "After receiving a lot of help, my life changed and will continue to change." Sometimes we can be prideful or want to prove something to ourselves or others that we can do things alone, that we're independent and don't need anyone. But that is extremely flawed thinking. Everyone needs help. Without a teacher, students would be left learning on their own. Business owners can't do things alone. That's why they hire help. With this series being about the superhero life, I get the feeling that nobody is going to be able to do anything by themselves. I get the feeling that characters are going to have to rely on their team and friends. There's a cool comparison with Deku and Katsuki, where Katsuki has first place with no rescue points versus Izuku, who is in 7th place and has 0 villain points, but mostly rescue points. In the end, I think it actually helps with their characterization, showing their priorities. Deku's mom told him, "You're really cool." Even though she wasn't supportive in the beginning, she is now, so it's never too late to change. On the topic of affirmations helping children with their learning, US News Report brought up a study where a research team found that Latino students who participated in values affirmation exercises, like writing and reflecting on their personal values, had persistently higher grades than Latino students in the control group who did not participate in the affirmation exercises. And a clinical psychologist and associate professor said, affirmations from teachers and caregivers can be a good way to bolster a student's sense of self-confidence. I thought it was interesting that Deku was wearing a very short tie compared to everyone else. This could symbolize that he's not as experienced with his quirk as the others. The homeroom teacher Shota has a good introduction. He looks exhausted. We as the audience instantly think he doesn't get enough sleep. When he got out of the bag, I was reminded of a caterpillar. It's symbolic to the heroes. It's likely they're going to experience their own metamorphosis during these classes. When All Might said, "The flame I passed on to you is still small," I was reminded of the expression passing the torch, which means relinquishing responsibilities or knowledge. The metaphoric expression alludes to the ancient Greek torch race, in which a lighted torch was passed from one runner to the next. A translation from both Greek and Latin, the English version dates from the late 1800s. About Eraserhead, All Might said, "You punished a whole class of last year's first years with expulsion." A study examining Michigan Department of Education data on public and charter schools from the 2017 to 2018 school year found that homeless or formerly homeless students were at least 4 times more likely to be suspended or expelled. 18% of formerly homeless students, 16% of currently homeless students, and 11% of economically disadvantaged but never homeless students were suspended or expelled. In contrast, only 4% of students not economically disadvantaged and never homeless were suspended or expelled. Well, the heroes got their superhero costumes. I want to talk about self-distancing. Self-distancing is the act of increasing the distance from your own egocentric perspective when assessing events and emotions that you experience. An example of this is LeBron James when leaving his team. He said, "I didn't want to make an emotional decision. I wanted to do what was best for LeBron James and what would make him happy." A study investigated the benefits of self-distancing on young children's perseverance. 4 and 6-year-old children were asked to complete a repetitive task for 10 minutes while having the option to take breaks by playing an extremely attractive video game. 6-year-olds persevered longer than 4-year-olds. Nonetheless, across both ages, children who impersonated a character such as Batman spent the most time working. Katsuki as a child was already talking extreme, saying things like, "Let's go kill the enemy." And he was wearing a shirt like the supervillain in the making Sid from Toy Story. He also said, "My quirk explosion lets me secrete nitroglycerin-like sweat from the sweat palms on the palm of my hand." This was set up early in the episode when we saw sweat drip from his palm. When talking about Katsuki, Deku said, "And I thought he was so cool." Katsuki, on the other hand, he said, "Even though you're scared, that's what I hate about you." Deku embodies love and respect. Katsuki represents hatred and grudges. He also said things like, "'Cause I'm better than you. He's just a pebble." It's dehumanizing Deku. I'm no psychologist, but I wonder if Katsuki has a superiority complex. That's an attitude of superiority which conceals actual feelings of inferiority and failure. Deku as a child tried to help up Katsuki after he slipped in the water. I wonder if he thought he looked weak or that Deku made him look weak. Katsuki claims he will surpass All Might. A Leonardo da Vinci quote says, "Poor is the pupil who does not surpass his teacher." The current generation of heroes, I think, would want the younger ones to go beyond. One writer said, "Great teachers believe that their students will surpass them in skill, in ability, and knowledge. Bad teachers believe they themselves are the idealized prototype, and that they are merely training replacements who will never be able to match their own greatness. Deku inspired his other classmates to do their best. Researchers conducted a study on the role superheroes play in motivating others to do real acts of good. Providing support for Hypothesis 1, participants primed with the superhero poster were significantly more likely to help than those primed with the neutral poster. Ida comes from a family of heroes. They look like knights. Ida's very uptight, plays by the rules. What comes to mind with knights is exactly that. Someone respectable, chivalrous. That wasn't always the case. At first, knights were heavily armed and prone to violence. These warriors were commanded by warlords and rewarded with land, or with a license to plunder villages where they did some terrible things. A medieval historian said, "You've got to find some way to get them to get along." Some things were done to create chivalry and discipline, particularly in romantic literature of the time, some of it written expressly for young noblemen who were being trained for knighthood. Knights were presented as pious, generous, and merciful. However, chivalric culture also encouraged knights to develop their own sense of morality rather than simply relying on church authorities. When the knights did follow a code of chivalry as they understood it, these ideas about honor and good behavior focused mostly on concern for the noble class that knights were part of, often at the expense of the poor. The villains have a lot of interesting designs. One creature reminds me of an angel from Evangelion. For sure, Nomu resembles an Evangelion, particularly Evangelion Unit 1. And this is our big battle. The young heroes have been training, and now we're going to see what they learned. The Venus Flytrap villain embodies the theme of these episodes, being in a trap. This entire place symbolizes a Venus flytrap of sorts, with the young heroes about to be devoured. Like all plants, Venus flytraps get its energy from the sun in a process called photosynthesis. It digests insects and arachnids to get nutrients that are not available in the surrounding environment. In the comics, villains usually team up or form an organization. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, just based on their negative character traits, like selfishness, greed, and pride. Here, however, they seem to be coordinated and getting along. Magneto wears a cape and looks like a kid wearing a diaper. It seems appropriate. He acts the most scared, he whines and cries a lot. The principal reminds me of the small mentor character who's in a position of authority. Yoda from Star Wars, for example, or the Master from Kung Fu Panda. A 2016 study found that skin conditions, including itching and flaky scalps, are common in people experiencing high-stress situations, having psychological conditions, or going through a major life event. While this is possible, it also could be something else based on the fact that there are hands all over his body. Self-harm itself is not a mental illness, but it's often connected to a mental health concern. According to mental health experts, self-harming behavior occurs due to a lack of coping skills used to handle stressors or other triggers that one experiences. Self-harm can take several different forms. Some of these include cutting yourself, or punching something else like a wall, intentionally scratching your skin. There's a quote from the novel entitled "The Wise Man's Fear." The quote is, "There are three things all wise men fear: the sea and storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentle man." When All Might arrived, the upbeat theme played. He even said, "It's fine now, I'm here." But he looked angry, which was a complete reversal of what we usually see, him saying that with a smile. So audiences know for sure he's not playing around. When All Might's in the hospital and he does the thumbs up, I can't help but think of Goku from Dragon Ball Z. To paraphrase Bulma, being around Goku, you know everything is going to be alright. Well, that's it for My Hero Academia, episodes 10 through 13, onward to episode 14. The best thing about art is that it's subjective and everyone has their own interpretation. Was your interpretation different than mine? Leave your comments, like, share. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel. Take it easy.